All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, Communicating Across Cultures. Thank you so much for joining us. Next slide, please. It's a pleasure to have you all here this afternoon. And my name is Shanta Belai, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. And I'm delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Communicating Across Cultures. Today's organizations face challenges like AI, globalization, and demographic shifts. Effective collaboration across diverse cultural groups, each with unique values, beliefs, and behaviors, is crucial for success. Future-focused organizations and growth-minded employees should prioritize intercultural competence, considering factors such as nationalities, languages, job functions, genders, and generations. Investing in better communication across cultures enhances leadership, inclusive teams, and employee engagement and productivity. In this webinar, we will highlight the increasing importance of intercultural competence for individuals and teams, explore how our personal beliefs and behaviors might influence interactions, and lastly, discuss relevant strategies to develop a cultural intelligence mindset. And I'd like to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Karen Gotch. Karen is the founder and principal of Global Collaborations Insights, a business consulting and executive coaching practice. She specializes in leadership development, virtual and hybrid teams, cultural and emotional intelligence, and communication capabilities. I will pass it over to you, Karen.
So let's get started. We've got a lot to cover today. And so this is a favorite quote from George Bernard Shaw. Let's not forget and let's not assume that we're making a complete connection and that our message is getting through. Even in a more fast-paced, multitasking virtual environment, jumping from one meeting to the next, you'll hear that awareness and assumptions are key themes today in our conversation. All right, we will try some mobile polling. So there are three options to set that up. You can either scan the QR code on the screen here. And when you do that, don't click register, click the line underneath, skip for now, and then wait. And then you can also text the message virtual teams, it has to be one word, to the number 22333. And if you use the texting, again, you want to wait until you see you've joined Karen Gotch's session, and then just wait until we get the polls set up. And then also another option, go to pollev.com/virtual teams. Again, has to be one word. So don't register again, click the skip for now, and then wait. So the easiest option is number one, just scanning that QR code. And then click skip for now and wait. And Shanta as well will be putting those directions in the chat as well. But once you're set up, you're good to go. So we should be able to just move forward from there. So let's try our first poll. Just get back. Okay, so where are you located right now? There are so many of you joining today, so let's practice a multiple choice question and share where you are. And don't forget to scroll down as well so that we can see the different options here. Mouse my cursor for a second. Okay, looks like, not surprisingly, we've got most from the Twin Cities Metro, but a little bit scattered throughout. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as a test, but also this ability to see where we are all from. And also a reminder that these are two facets of culture, geography and time zone, as we know so well from working hybrid and virtual, as well as that way of working. And so this speaks to the university's reach. We're no longer just in the metro area or on the campuses outside. We're moving forward. All right, so let's try another poll. And you'll see the directions here on some of the slides as we go in case you get bumped out. So another poll, this is a word cloud. And I'm going to ask you to connect the words so that they can stay all together. So put a hyphen if you want to use a phrase. Otherwise, you can use single words as well. So one communication, cultural communication stumbling block for you. So go ahead and put your answers in there. Hyphenate those words if you need to keep that phrase together. All right, they're coming in fast and furious. I told you we had a large group here. So uh, with that understanding, it shows you the broadness of a cultural communication and the breadth maybe of what we could talk about. And you'll see there are so many different pieces coming up here. Languages popping up as the top one, but so many others like the different working environments, physical distance, idioms that we're using. Again, some of these are related to more language, social norms, the online work environment, speaking up against injustice, the uncertainty, the flexibility. How do we navigate? How do we spin on a dime, right? And realize what we need to do as we go. So I wish we could touch on all of these different topics. I see some body language in there as well, but this will give you, this will plant the seed for your curiosity and hopefully give us some more energy to move forward. This, by the way, is a short version of my 6-hour class through CCAPS, and it's called Communicating Across Cultures. And we do offer it in October and December this year. So if that interest stays, you know where to find us. All right, let's move forward to the next slide. Okay, one more poll for this portion of the call. What are the benefits when it's going well? Because a lot of times we focus on the challenges and the problems, but you know what? Let's celebrate. Let's be cognizant of what we like about this, of how communicating across these different cultures enhances our lives, enhances our work. No hesitation there. Look at all of those bubbling up, and I'm glad to see that. I think this is not surprising. If you found interest in this webinar and wanted to attend today, you no doubt already have some level of interest in communicating across cultures. And so you see that there are a lot of advantages and benefits towards moving ahead. And you will also see these slides pop up in the recording as well. So while we can't discuss them all in detail today, you can see the diversity in the group that we have. Going to move forward, we'll have more polls in just a bit, but just a foundational piece here. The foundations of culture, we'll start with a quick definition of culture. It's a word we use all the time, but how do we actually define it? Well, here's more of a dictionary definition. And it really is reminding us that culture is a part of everything we do. Our values, our beliefs, and our behaviors may be shared within one cultural group or with some individual differences as well, or across many different groups. And the iceberg metaphor here is handy, right? The values and beliefs are often underwater. That is, they're not always visible to the people that we're communicating with. And so we don't always send the right messages, or we don't always receive the right messages. That could be a reason. Now, behaviors are often more visible, so they're above the waterline. Oftentimes we can see those more actively than what's going on in somebody's head or in their heart. And so thinking about how we might define these groups, because there are a lot of them here. And some of you might be very familiar with that quote up at the top there, the way we do things around here. If you've joined a new company or an organization, or maybe you've been with one for a long time, we can fall into those patterns, those comfort zones. And when we're taken out of those comfort zones, it can be a bit of a shock. But back to the question of how do we define what these groups are when we say that culture defines or distinguishes one group's approach to another's. This visual, called the 4 layers of diversity, comes from work by Garden Schwartz and Rowe. And it highlights a multi-layered complexity of our being and our experience. So we can call these attributes. We start with personality at the core, and then we find those attributes which speak most to you. Some of them are going to jump out as a clear part of your identity, and others are going to be more important for the people that you're communicating with. So culture can be geography, can be age, gender, family, education, socioeconomic status, and of course, organizational, which we find on the outer ring here. And sometimes we don't always think as deeply about. So thinking about how much tenure you have at your organization, what function do you work in? Are you part of a union? Are you working at the headquarters or the central office? Are you a manager or an individual contributor? Those can all contribute to our sense of identity and how others view us as well. So I ask you here to think about, what is your story? What are those few characteristics that really jump out and have played the biggest role in who you are and how you would define yourself and the culture that you belong to? And then also think about others in your circle. Who are the people that you tend to navigate towards? What about the people on your work team, in your community, in your family? So this diagram is hopefully a good reminder, again, of how complex we are. And when we're talking about communicating across cultures, we have gone way beyond some of the original research in just country by country or geographic location. All right, so let's move on here. And then again, I just say, remember the iceberg, right? Those assumptions. You may not understand what someone has been through, what someone is going through, or what they're proud of, or what they would like to share until you build that trust in the relationship. So one way to think about cultural competency is CQ, or cultural intelligence. And you can see here that CQ is the developed capability. I highlight developed because you can learn and grow stronger in these skills to prepare, navigate, and relate effectively in many culturally diverse situations. And CQ actually picks up where emotional intelligence, or EQ, leaves off. These are both core human-centric skill sets that are both rooted in self-awareness. So remember, when we're talking about our identity, our personality, how we work, to avoid any generalizations or stereotypes, we need to remember that each of these is just a slice of what makes us a unique individual within a cultural group, even if we can come up with some generalizations for the group. Diverse teams with high CQ, or cultural intelligence agility, outperform homogeneous teams. All right. So with this idea of being able to develop your CQ, it's not enough to just bring in a diverse team, people representing different areas or different groups. What you want to do is amp that up with high CQ agility so that people are able to understand and grow and adapt. And you can then outperform homogeneous teams. Think of it as a 1 + 1 = 3, right? So the sum is greater than the parts. It can really boost your team's performance. All right. And also CQ predicts these following components. Now, I put these up here. I often include them in my class because if your company is investing in your training or wants to improve certain skill sets like cultural intelligence, they might want to know, well, what are the benefits? What is the ROI? And in the previous poll, you shared all of those benefits, all of those advantages. So here you see a list of a variety of things that can be improved once you have a team that is very inclusive and understands cultural intelligence. Okay, how we adjust and adapt, our judgment decision making, our negotiation effectiveness. We know that that varies across many cultures. How we develop trust, idea sharing, and innovation on a team, and even leadership effectiveness. And then at the bottom there talks about profitability and cost savings, because let's be real, if we're going to invest in training, invest in an initiative, what is that ROI? And for an example here, it might be tied to employee engagement. So how do you recruit the right employees, the right talent, and how do you retain them? How do you keep them? And as we know, recruiting and training and replacing employees can be very expensive. So as we're thinking about what is important to organizations, we need to think about what's top of mind in the workplace. We talk about demographic changes that we're expecting. So a large number of retiring employees, all of the institutional knowledge that is walking out the door for them and is lost to an organization. We talk about technology. We talk about returning to the office versus a hybrid workforce. And we know that these can cause some consternation with employees, maybe even yourself. You're wondering, what is next? What can I expect? Well, one of these other big topics that we certainly are hearing more and more about in the recent past is AI. And it doesn't take more than a quick Google to see all of the headlines out there. Granted, some of them are more clickbait than others, but I pulled these from around the world. So employers are concerned about this. Employees are concerned about this. Why do I bring this up? I recently presented at a conference on this topic of how we can bring human-centric skills into collaboration with AI. So rather than thinking about human skills versus AI or AI, how do we think of it as human-centric skills collaborating with AI? How can we bring the best of what we do and what we might still do better, at least for now, than artificial intelligence? And hopefully that you see cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence, how we communicate with each other on a human level still has advantages over what is being created or what is available to us now. So in other words, using our unique perspectives to foster these creative, inclusive collaborations is a win for us, and CQ, cultural intelligence, can play a role in that. So back to two quick polls here. How would you rate your organization's effectiveness working across cultures? The first two polls were more about you as an individual, but let's look at the organizational level. Choose one letter, A through E. And the way it's set up, we're almost giving them a grade, right? So let's see what we've got here. All right, C, grade level C, average, came in first and has stayed in first place ever since, followed though by B, above average. And so it's good to see that we are making progress, but we still have a ways to go in making this part of our discussions. Now, I do want to acknowledge 8%, 9% of you who said your organization is excellent at it. And it's always exciting to hear that. And also, we can be curious about what initiatives you have underway or how you're creating a culture of belonging so people can communicate across cultures. Now let's acknowledge too, D and E got about roughly 14% of you say that your organization is below average or very poor at working across cultures. And so that probably hits home, right? And you're probably looking at the majority of the group and saying, what are those organizations doing? How can I find out more about that? And it's about getting out there. It's about connecting with our network and sharing ideas and reading more and proposing ideas to our organization and just being a champion. My wish for you as part of this webinar is that you go back with some of these ideas and start those conversations in your organization. Let's do the last poll here related to your organization again, and hyphenate those words if you have a phrase. And you can answer several times here if you would like. Are there any different difficult cultural challenges impacting your team beyond the individual ones? All right, we've got some similar ones that come up the previous poll for individual answers, but also some that stretch across our teams as well. Certainly the ones with the most responses: language, whiteness, so dealing with different races, ethnicities. I see gender in there, sexual orientation, and communication, of course, comes in at number 1, we would have to say. I see leadership coming in. I see research, see time zones. The answers are coming fast and furious. There are some commonalities, and they're, again, to reiterate the spectrum of what we have across the board, we've got a wide range of answers here. So thank you for that. Thank you for that engagement. To look further, let's look at a model that will give us some more insight into how we are expressing our communication across cultures and those cultural competencies. I mentioned CQ can be developed with awareness and action. There's a CQ assessment in my class, and it is by the Cultural Intelligence Center. If you're interested, you can look up the resources they have available on their website as well. But there are 2 components to this assessment: 10 behavioral preferences that you see on the left here, as well as 4 CQ, cultural intelligence capabilities. And there are 2 parts to the assessment, because one of them does not give you any scores. It gives you a placement on the spectrum, and that's the behavioral preferences. So you may end up being over on the more individualistic side or the collectivistic side or somewhere in between. When you move to the second part of the assessment, that's where we get into some more scores and different strategies to help you develop those. But in our interest of time today, we're going to touch on 5 of the 10 behavioral preferences. And so I've highlighted those for you. So what are behavioral preferences? These are general orientation to life, work, and relationships. As I said, there's no score because there's no right way to behavior, to act out these different preferences. They will give you insight into potential biases that you have towards different preferences. You may have some insight into, why am I being told that my communication is too direct for this particular organization or this particular project? Someone else might operate in a much more indirect way, and you might have a different perception of that. So it's a way to better understand it. It's not a predictor of your ability to work effectively across cultures. No right or wrong. As I said, you're placed on a spectrum. It's how we prefer to navigate life, interact, communicate, plan, and complete tasks, along with a number of other things. So awareness and flexing our behavior through increased knowledge here can improve our communication and also our leadership effectiveness. So what does that look like? I'm going to go through these 5 pretty quickly, and I understand it's just a very high-level overview. Hopefully it does pique your curiosity to learn more. All right, so the first one, individualism versus collectivism. Remember, you might find yourself leaning more towards the edge of individualism, the far edge of collectivism, or somewhere in between. Just one second while you take a look at that and move my window here. Individualism, an emphasis on individual goals and individual rights, versus collectivism, which is an emphasis on group goals and personal relationships. Now, if I could choose just one example that would highlight this for you very broadly, think of the pandemic. Think of how we had different policies, different preferences around masking, around vaccinations, around working remotely, around working hybrid, right? And this took place at the country level. It took place at the government, at each national government level. It took place locally. It took place at our own companies and institutions. And it's obvious that we were flexing our different behavioral preferences even within our own small cultural groups. So questions to consider here as you're thinking about which side you might tend towards at any given time in your work or your life, think about identity. Back to the 4 layers of diversity. Who am I? Who are we as a team or a family or a community? Whose rights and goals matter or matter the most or matter in this particular situation? Now, if you are leading or working with people that tend towards the individualistic side, you might want to emphasize that individual responsibility piece, or you might want to encourage accountability. On the other side, if you're leading or working with someone who tends towards collectivism, you might want to emphasize group goals or encourage collaboration. So when you strategize, consider both individual and group needs to reach the most people. And also emphasize both personal responsibility and consensus. Now, from a practical application, you might use this thought process when you're thinking of assignments or ownership in a project. Right, so that was our first one, individualism versus collectivism. The second one, power distance, and we measure that in high versus low. So for low power distance, there's more of an emphasis on equality and shared decision making. And high power distance, there's more of an emphasis on status differences where superiors make decisions. Now, one example where you might see this is with the size and structure of your organization. When you think about, for example, a university with its groups of faculty, administration, the board, different colleges, different campuses, so many different cultural groups included there. And they may decide to make decisions differently. Some are centralized, some are decentralized. There may be more of an emphasis on equality, or there may be more of an emphasis on superiors making a decision from the board to the executive level, down to the department level, right? And again, so forgot to mention there, so the flip side of that, think about a small startup, someone starting their own business in their basement, and they slowly grow. They bring a few people on board. Suddenly they're up to, 10 or 12 employees, right? But they're still in those early stages, and they're all rolling up their sleeves and getting to work, and they're around one table, and they're communicating that way. Much more of a shared decision making, perhaps more of an emphasis on equality. And you'll see me hedging this a lot because it always depends on the different situation and the different group of people that we have. But questions to consider for power distance include authority. So how much does status matter in our group, and who should decide? In order to strategize, remember using both formal and fluid structures if possible, and that both of those can generate good solutions. You can solicit questions and new ideas from all team members, especially if they're more low power distance on the left, and you can de-emphasize some of those formalities. On the right-hand side, you might solicit feedback privately or from a whole group. You may emphasize titles, role, and hierarchy. That's one of the norms of a particular culture, right? Who do you talk to first? How do you call them? How do you address them? And so you can balance the benefits of the broad perspectives and the need for decisiveness. And then from a practical application standpoint, think about power distance when you have some decisions to make, when you're trying to prioritize some key tasks. This may impact how you get that done most effectively. All right, let's move to the next one. This is uncertainty avoidance. So an emphasis on flexibility and adaptability. So you're easy with the roller coaster of life. You're like, bring it on. I can handle the change. If you tend more towards the right side, high uncertainty avoidance, you're trying to avoid any uncertainty. You have an emphasis on planning and predictability. So an example here might be within, the nature of your role. So we can have cultures within functional roles as well. You may have chosen a major in school or gone down a certain career path because you felt comfortable in it. You knew that you had certain skills or certain attributes where you might fit in with that type of work. Now, obviously, that's a generalization because we can have many different kinds of people in different roles, but sometimes this pops out a little bit more in some places than others. For example, if your functional role is in more of a regulated role, for example, legal or safety or finances, you're going to have to pay attention to some of those guardrails, right? The regulations, the rules, the laws, whatever you're looking at. And so it may be that you have more of a tendency towards high uncertainty avoidance. You're more of a risk manager. Not necessarily always, but sometimes this happens. Versus the other side, maybe more sales and marketing, right? You're willing to think more creatively outside the box. The team expects that from you to bring a large number of ideas to the table, and then we'll vet those. But there's still individual differences, differences of preferences in there as well. So what if you're leading or working with people on one side or the other? On the left side, you might emphasize high-level objectives, right? What's our goal? What's the biggest, the highest level you can share? And then how do we delegate and avoid micromanaging? These may be people that want to take something and run with it, right? They're less worried about risk. They're willing to put up with that flexibility and that change. Where on the right-hand side, it might benefit you to provide more detailed instruction and direction and expect questions from them, or ask for questions and provide regular feedback. To strategize, you can be attentive to the big picture and the details. Consider both feasibility of something and the primary objectives of a situation. So really the questions to consider here focus around ambiguity. So how do we handle uncertainty, and how do I react to change are two good ones. Practically speaking, this might come up when you're planning projects, project management, or even just deciding on work habits and how we relate to each other. All right, ready for number 4? Context. And this one can often show up more visibly in our work. Low context versus high context. In other words, direct communication versus indirect communication. Low context is an emphasis on explicit communication. The words are important. The specifics are important. The transparency is important. In a high context or indirect situation, there's an emphasis on indirect communication, tone or context. You're not necessarily spelling everything out, listing every bullet. There's an understanding of what somebody else might already know and what you're going to assume that they know as well. All right, so one example that I have from my personal situation a long time ago in an organization, I worked with a senior leader, high-level executive, who obviously was receiving a lot of communications per day. And one of the ways that she managed that was to let people know that if they sent her a message on her phone, it should fit in the screen without any scrolling. In other words, the message she was communicating is, I will look at your message, I will respond, but I don't have time to scroll. So you know what? Don't add a greeting or a salutation. Don't add some other small talk or ask me how I'm doing. Don't add a lot of extra words. Give me the purpose, give me what you want, give me bullet points, and keep it straight. And as someone who's more of a direct communicator as well, that took me off guard just a little bit, but I realized that we can adjust to our situation. We can adjust to the role at hand and what we need and want to ask for from other people. So there are no misunderstandings. So we're not offending somebody. So we're not unclear on whether our messages are being received. So if you are thinking about questions for this particular behavior, think about ambiguity. Um, think about communication with the ambiguity. How should I convey meaning? There are many different ways to do that. How important are words and specific messages versus more of a general approach? If you're working or leading somebody who has a penchant for more direct communication, you can provide explicit directions and expect questions from them. You can prioritize clarity over harmony. On the other side, pay attention to unspoken communication. You can prioritize harmony with this particular individual or team, and also saving face. These are the qualities that might be more important in that communication process than the specificity. So to strategize, you can promote clarity and harmony, as I said, both of them. You can recognize the value of nuances as well as explicit communication. So think about that when you are leading meetings, when you're sending communications. Give it an extra moment to think through who is my audience and what needs to be communicated and how. All right, let's go to the last one here, expressiveness. And there's definitely a tie in here to emotional intelligence. One way of communicating is non-expressive, or what we might call neutral communication. An emphasis on non-emotional communication, hiding our feelings, or at least not showing them as much. If you have this tendency or this preference, you may have heard that you have a good poker face, or people aren't really sure how to read you and they may need to follow up with you. On the right-hand side, this is an extreme, right? Both of these photos. Are you more expressive or affective? Do you have an emphasis on expressive communication? You're open to sharing feelings. Now, the other side of this, of having a great poker face, is somebody can read you like a book, right? They can read everything about you just walking in the room. They know what kind of day you're having. They know whether they should approach you or not. Now, once we understand how somebody chooses to express themselves, then we have to step back a little bit and think about some of those, again, some of those cultural specific items. Now, I know somebody put eye contact as one of the challenges in the earlier poll, as well as body language, and eye contact is a great example. We know that in some cultures, some business cultures, some national cultures, eye contact is considered very respectful, very attentive. It's showing interest. If you're interviewing for a job here and you look at some of the top strategies or tips, one of the top things will be make sure you have good eye contact with the interviewer. In other cultures, other countries, that would be a lack of respect, right? And so indirect eye contact would be a sign of humility, of respect, and it would not be offensive. And so we do dance into these very blurred boundaries sometimes, especially when we have different cultural groups crossing. Because as I said before, with the 4 layers of diversity, you're not just representing one culture, you're representing many, many different cultures, however you define that. So here, obviously, you're going to think about questions that relate to emotions. Should feelings be expressed in this particular setting or in this particular relationship? And if yes, when and how do we express those emotions? You can think about considering both feelings and facts, right? You can affirm both the emotional and the neutral communication styles. So if you are working with somebody on the left-hand side who's more neutral in their expression, emphasize facts more, not necessarily emotional impacts, especially if you're trying to persuade them. Remember that neutrality does not mean disinterest. They may just have a different way of showing interest, and you need to dig a bit deeper there. On the right-hand side, show your interest with tone and body language, in addition to just your words. Allow space for emotional expression with them, or have a conversation or an understanding of how you interact together. And from a practical application, think about this when you're checking on understanding after you've communicated with somebody, if you're not sure if they have received your message the way you thought, and also giving and getting feedback as well. So that was a quick hit on the first 5 behavioral preferences. We're going to do a real quick change up right here. And I'm going to ask you to think about, for the next poll, what are your initial reactions to this photo? Give you a moment to think about that. What is going on here? Okay, so put your initial reactions here. Hyphenate the words if you have a phrase. What comes to mind? We are talking about how sometimes we react, we make assumptions, and hopefully we can step back a bit and think about what we might not be seeing underneath the iceberg. Okay? So we've got, no one's holding back here. We've got a lot of responses. You'll see the most commonly answered ones: annoyed, rude, selfish, inconsiderate, entitled. I'm looking between the lines here to see some name calling in there, but also some understanding, maybe going a little bit deeper, a lack of awareness. Got some definite name calling in here. I'll skip past that one. Let's go to the next slide, and I want you to think a little bit more deeply now. We just went through these 5 behavioral preferences. Take a look at those 5 and think about which ones might come into play in this situation. All right. You know nothing about it. You don't know about the driver. You don't know what happened before the parking. You don't know what's happening now or after. But which 5 of these do you think might show up in this situation? And then down below are the other 5, just to give you a clue of the other ones that might also be applicable that we didn't talk about. And always the reminder to remember the iceberg. What are those assumptions that we jump to right away? And when we pull back, when we have a chance to reflect, what does that look like? So some that I've heard in my class include, maybe this was the owner of a company, right? And this is executive parking, and there's no one else there, and he or she just took the spot because that's the way it's done. Perhaps this person is entitled. I saw that word pop up on the previous page. So maybe it's not their assigned parking spot, but they feel like, okay, they deserve it. Maybe it's an emergency drop-off. Maybe there's a medical situation. We can't see what's surrounding us. Is it a hospital? Is it an apartment building? Is it something where there was a need for immediate action? Is it the weekend and there's maybe no one at a place? Maybe it's a business. And so somebody just said, I can park wherever I want. There's no signs there. Is it possibly disabled parking? And was maybe there not enough space, or was there disabled parking right next to the car and that vehicle had to cross over the lines for a minute? And so the other car made the decision to park between the lines there. And so we don't know what's going on. And so I'm going to ask you, as you're thinking about this photo and these 5 behavioral preferences that we went through, I put them up here again so you can remind yourself what that looks like from a picture perspective. The next poll, I'm going to ask you to select as many as you want here, A, B, C, D, or E, but which of these could be part of that situation? All right, so I'll open up the poll here, and it's multiple choice, A through E. Okay, individualism versus collectivism. jumped out in front, and I don't think it's going to give up the lead here in this horse race. Admittedly, some of these are hard without having that context. But we do understand that if somebody is driving a car, that's an individual decision or individual decisions being made behind the wheel, but are they or are they not thinking about the group, thinking about the impact on others in a particular situation? Power distance, low versus high, that's creeping up there as well, depending what the situation is. As I said before, someone brought up, well, maybe it's an executive at a company. And so maybe they are flexing some of that high power distance, right? Where they have certain parking lots for senior leaders. We don't know, but there could be a difference in there. Uncertainty avoidance doesn't come in quite as high, but yeah, it could be a risk taker, not so much a risk taker. Again, in this case, we don't know, but if we were to make an assumption without learning more, we could say, well, parking right over those lines could set somebody else up for an accident or dinging your car or something else. Direct versus indirect was up there a bit, bounced back a bit. Yeah, it would be interesting to have a conversation, right, with that driver or others around, maybe some people who saw the situation, and find out how that gives you more information into what's happening there. And then some of you said expressiveness as well. Hard to know what that driver's mood was for the day, what's going on in their lives, and maybe imagining that. The idea here is just to understand that all of these factors are available to you to think about and to help you wade through a communication situation, whether it's really positive or whether it's negative and challenging for you. So I hope you understood how some of these can connect. And, when you're at Target this week and you see a similar situation, hopefully you can think about our webinar today, and I'll give you some more insight into what might be going on with that person or in that situation. All right, we are winding down here. It's tempting to want tips and tricks, right, when you're learning about a culture. If you remember that initial poll that I gave, and it was, what are your challenges with cultures? And we had a whole screen full. Each one of those we could do a deeper dive into it. And so what do we do? What do we do with tips and tricks and do's and don'ts? Sometimes we think about them if we have a trip on the books, we're going to vacation, especially if it's to a different country, right? And we go right to Google. We've got so much information at our hands. Some of it's great information, some of it's not so great information. And how do we decide? Well, for this particular topic, we're going to stay at the more general level here. So what I would suggest is that you use any of those resources available to you as a starting point, but then find someone to get good, trusted feedback from for your particular situation. Whether it's somebody that's been at the organization for a long time, or someone that has worked with a particular group internationally or virtually. And what can you do to ease that communication, to build the trust if you haven't already? And if you consider yourself an expert or somebody who's very well versed in a particular culture or a language or a social group or any other way that you define culture, how can you reach out to somebody else and offer that information? How can you be a champion coming out of our webinar today and say, you know what, I want to learn from this person, but I've got a lot to offer as well. All right. And so I'm going to move to the next slide, but these will be available to you in the recording that you'll receive. All right. So similarly, 7 more pointers for better connection. Notice there is a lot of emotional intelligence woven in here, as I've said throughout. There are personality factors involved, and all of these are going to depend on your particular situation, the support that you have, how you're feeling in a given situation or communicating with a certain person. We all know all it takes is a leader to change. within our organization, and it can very much change our experience, either in a positive way or a not so positive way. And so we can always build these muscles up and work towards these better connections. So this is, again, just a reminder here that these speak to what we've covered throughout today. Awareness and action are the two most important things to remember. Start small. And that last bullet point there, don't overlook your progress and your successes. Give yourself a pat on the back. Lean into your self-compassion a little bit more. Sometimes we're so hard on ourselves. Knowing our values, beliefs, and preferences, and adapting our behavior as it makes sense, not giving up our authenticity, but meeting someone halfway or learning more about a particular cultural group or lens. And as our knowledge grows and our comfort grows, hopefully our communication becomes even more effective. So let's finish up with one more poll. What's a takeaway for you from today? Is there a particular topic or a behavioral preference that stood out to you, or something that you saw texted in one of the polls? What will you think about when you leave? My apologies. There we go. There's the actual poll slide. Context, definitely. And it's okay to say, this depends. It depends how I act based on the context. It depends on my comfort level. Depends on power distance, awareness, the questions to ask ourselves, neutral expressions, open-mindedness, clarity. And the bigger answers there: context, understanding, patience, and communication. And don't trust your assumptions. Be curious, be human. All situations require thoroughness. All right, you picked up a lot. I know I went through this very quickly. Thank you. Thank you for your participation today. If you are interested, if you remain curious, join me at these classes. Again, Communicating Across Cultures. These are all online, two half days, 6 hours total in October, December. Emotional intelligence, we take another grade assessment. We'll have that in October. And if you're in HR, I have a strategic talent management class as well, end of October. So I hope your mind and your spirit have been widened today a bit with our discussion on cultural communication. And with that, I'm going to turn it over real quick to Shanta.
Great. So thank you so much, Karen, for presenting today. And just before we move on, we might have questions for one Q&A. And if not, we have posted within the chat where you can send your questions to ccapsinfo@umn.edu. And we'll pass those along to Karen. And so a question here is, how do you recommend giving direct communication while providing high context at the same time?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question, please? I was just looking at a chat question. I'm sorry.
No
Please
problem.
go ahead.
How do you recommend giving direct communication while providing high context at the same time?
Oh, interesting. Well, I would think, first of all, what is your channel of communication, right? And so I would not recommend trying to do that through a text or through a direct message or even an email, because we know that people's ability to concentrate is very limited, as proven right there when I was looking at the chat, right? Our brains need to focus. So if you know that you are talking to someone who appreciates high context, and yet also as a direct communicator, you might have to balance that a little bit. Maybe the best route for you here is to schedule a live conversation with somebody. If you find that your email or your written communication starts to get too long, starts to get too dense, because there's important context that you want to share, is it time to pick up the phone? Is it time to schedule a Teams meeting? in order to break through, because that will also give you that body language, which is sometimes up to, you know, 90% of what we're interpreting from communication. Once you see the face, once you see the body language, you'll get a lot more signals as to whether you're going too much into the context or too much into the directness.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I think that will be the question we'll have for today. And again, please send your questions over to ccapsinfo@umn.edu and we'll get those over to Karen. And I'll just have you go to the next slide, please. So CCAPS now offers flexible workforce development solutions designed to equip employees with targeted knowledge and skills for your organization needs. Our programs include industry-driven bachelor's and master's programs, along with 12 non-credit certificates and over 80 individual courses. If you or someone in your organization would like to learn more, please schedule a consultation with our business development representative, Beth Laurie. And I'll have you go to the next slide, please. So thank you all for listening. As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of today's webinar. The recording will also be posted to our CCAPS webinar archive as well as our CCAPS YouTube page. And university employees are now eligible to receive well-being points for listening to our webinars. So please use the link there and fill out that form for our webinar presentation. And I just want to thank you all again for joining us today, and you all have a wonderful afternoon.